The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hopefully you all can hear me. Um, Let me introduce myself. Let's see, it's 11, what time is it? Oh, let's see now. It's 11 o'clock exactly. That's my clock's a little slow. Anyway, let me introduce myself. I'm William Gamble and I work for IT governance. Well, who the hell is that? Well, okay. I'm actually a lawyer, oddly enough. I used to be a tax lawyer. I've written 3 books on law and economics and emerging markets. And what does that have to do with cybersecurity? Well, for ITG, I also have 4 certifications. There are not a lot of lawyers out there that get 4 certifications in cybersecurity, including the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner certification. And I also, for ITG, I consult in terms, I teach the implementation of ISO 27001 and auditing of ISO 27001. I also have written extensively and teach on global privacy laws. So I also teach on the GDPR, US privacy laws, things like the CCPA, HIPAA, what is it, Graham Leach Bliley, whatever weird name that is. I also do stuff in terms of securities concepts. So there are very few areas in business law that I have not practiced. And right now we're going to talk about cybersecurity, which is wonderful because we live in exciting times. Let me tell you, the whole point of this webinar is to make sure that there's only one virus you worry about. And really, the whole point is, in my lectures, I always like, it's not in the slide deck, but I like to talk about, it's Kiminchi Castle, which was built in the 13th century in Japan, in the prefecture of Osaka. And it has, if you look at the map, it's really cool because it has, these moats within moats within moats, which is basically the concept of layered defense. And the problem right now is all that's gone out the window because we are teleconferencing and doing all sorts of stuff from home. And that's, presents its whole new set of problems. If anybody's been following the news lately, you've seen all the wonderful things about Zoom and all the security and privacy concerns that has engendered. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to talk about adapting your systems, what out there, what are the attacks, and what other things are happening. Anyway, this is what we do. IT governance actually has been in the certification and cybersecurity business probably longer than anybody else in the world. It's a British company, and we were the first people to certify to the British standard, which was 7799, I believe, which later became ISO 27001 in 2005. And so we do everything, everything ISO and everything in terms of cybersecurity. And I work in the United States, and I'm one of the first people who do so. And I very much enjoy doing all these trainings and webinars and stuff like that, because this is the most fascinating area. This is also a little bit more about ITG. We also have some software and independent organizations, and we do this. We've done this basically all over the world, which is why it's really important, especially if you have a global business, to understand the reach of all these things. I have done a matrix of cybersecurity and privacy law in over 20 countries because I've written 3 books about it. This is global, as is the internet. And as are obviously the attacks that we're seeing right now. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about is this is split up into 5 sections, just so we can hopefully get organized here. That will be something new. Okay, we're going to go to overview of the phishing attacks. Now, I've just spent the morning looking at that, and it is a moving target, and they are having a lot of fun. Let me put it that way. We'll also look at some examples of some of the phishing attacks, some of which come as recently as basically in the last 2 days. So this is something. We'll also give some cybersecurity tips for staff working at home. And a lot of these have come from my research, and I just checked them this morning against the SANS list, and they're all there. If you wish, I can also, if we have time, we'll do a brief rundown of some of the advantages and disadvantages of some of the teleconferencing stuff that's out there. And then we'll talk about implementing staff security awareness program. And for my money, and I, as I teach this thing, and I truly have swallowed the Kool-Aid on this, one of the most important things that you can do, and I always do with my clients, is to make sure that your staff are security aware, because, yeah, oh Lord, it's bad. Yeah, that's all I can say is, yeah, we'll talk about that in just a moment, about what happens, what happens when your staff is not aware. I mean, we are the weak link, and we have to make sure that everybody in the organization, gets the news, understands what they're doing. I am, as you guessed, I'm been around for quite a while, and quite often, I talk to my children anyway, think they understand cybersecurity, and a lot of employees do when they really don't. So it's really important to, be careful and make sure your staff is aware of all these problems. Okay, the whole point of the COVID-19 is, I'm sure, hopefully, all of you are sophisticated enough to realize that the hackers are not some kid in his parents' basement wearing a hoodie. These are very, very, well-organized organizations. I was reading something about basically it was basically organized as a call center. It was in Jamaica, and they were targeting. It wasn't, it was basically straight fraud. But they were targeting old people with, auto calls, robocalls, but, talking to them, and they were, stealing tons of money. And it was run like a business. People clocked in, they clocked out, they had incentives, the whole 9 yards. So these are some of the best organized, cleverest people in the world. So when we're talking about our adversaries in this, we're not talking about amateurs. We're talking about, the best. And they are going to use every, trick in the book, and there are quite a lot of them, in order to do this. Now, our best way to do this would be basically to prepare. Okay, here's something out of New Yorker, which basically, I don't think they transitioned to cybercrime a long time ago. But also cybercrime, the numbers are absolutely astounding. It's probably one of the largest wealth transfers in history. In law and economics, the probability of someone committing the crime is a function of the rewards and the probability of getting caught and the punishment. The great thing about cyber criminals, the probability of getting caught and the punishment are basically zero. So, and the rewards are astronomical. So we're going to see this go up. Last number I saw was $1.5 trillion. The Ruckus ransomware alone has garnered $3 billion. And the point of that, and next year, theoretically, it's $2 trillion. The point of all this is that these people get paid a lot better than I do. So, and they are going to really, do the best they can. So obviously the most successful social vector is through social engineering. And a lot of it's going to go through teleworker, telemedicine, and video conferencing. because that's what we're doing now. And so what we're doing quite often is we're going outside the castle. We're going outside the perimeter, which has been, all these, a lot of my delegates, I have the best delegates in the world. They're all CISSPs, and these guys and gals are true professionals. And it's really interesting to talk to them about the types of defenses they have incorporated. The problem is that quite often the defenses stop at the front door because the early stuff has been in a perimeter defense. And of course, now a lot of the problem is that, in this world, everything changes exceptionally rapidly. As I tell my delegates, there are four things that are constantly going to change. The technology is going to change. When I got my certifications, 4 years ago, we were all talking about networks. Now everything's been migrated to the clouds, which is a total different set of issues. So the technology, the hacks are going to change. But I listen every day to the various hacks, and that changes constantly. The other thing that's going to happen is it's going to change enormously is your business model. I mean, this is a perfect example. We went from everybody working in offices and having burglar alarms, and we got perimeter secure, physical security. We've got perimeter logical security. We've got all sorts of virtual stuff all over the place, and all of a sudden that's not there anymore. And also what your company gets into is going to change tomorrow. The last thing that's going to change, and I'll tell you, I've been practicing law for 40 years, and nothing in this area changes as quickly as the regulatory environment in this area. I mean, for example, obviously telemedicine is a big area. It's very, very important, but that is covered, that's covered by the privacy rules of HIPAA. And that has theoretically been rolled back, but I don't know how far. I don't know if there's any regulations on that or what they've done. The privacy rule, as you probably know, is 45164 CFR 164.500, and I'm not sure about that. And then the other problem is like video conferencing. It just came out that, for example, Zoom it has a lot of stuff in China. Uh-oh. As soon as you hear that word, you got a problem. Why? Why is that a problem? Well, because the Chinese, like many other countries, have cybersecurity laws. Only their cybersecurity laws are more interested in making sure the state has access to all information that comes into the country, and that not a lot of information, at least about Chinese citizens, leaves the country. And so this could be a real issue in terms of privacy concerns in various sensitive areas. And under the GDPR, you've got Article 9, it's Article 9, which is special information, and that protects healthcare information. And I can't think out of the 20 laws, this is something you really have to worry about, because it's not only cybersecurity, it has a lot to do with privacy. And that's something you have to, consider in terms of whatever architecture you have. And then, of course, there's phishing and social engineering, and this is, causing a major issue in various areas. Obviously there's a 14,000. Actually, that number may not be correct. I saw another number today that said there might have been only a 6,000%. There are 18, according to the FBI, there's 18 million scam emails about the virus, and they're coming in with these. Some of them are this one, sophisticated B2B scams. Czechoslovakia and their airport and main hospital, they said recently that they have fended off a major cybersecurity attack, and they said it was a nation state, which is rather interesting. You probably know that the North Koreans probably financed their nuclear program with cybersecurity. They do it very well. They're professionals, and so what this does, the COVID business, and now the stimulus checks, create enormous problems in terms of creating an environment where social engineering works a lot better. This is an example of a, obviously one of our scam emails, and it's, I got one on my cell phone. I still don't know what it was, but it was some website. You also have to be very, very careful of the websites. For example, the WHO, their website is WHO dot, I believe, INT, but somebody has the domain WHO.org. So you think, oh, okay, that could be good. It's WHO.org. Why wouldn't that be good? Well, it wasn't. This was a, it was a place where they were, getting a lot of information from people. So that's one of the things they want to harvest, is as much information as possible. The thing is, if you look at the advertising and influencing people, there are a lot of reasons. These are 4 reasons that it's very, very easy for social and phishing exercise, social engineering, to work properly in this type of environment, because your victims are, you're imbalanced. Your victims are in a new situation. For example, I think it says, you think you have problems. The German state. This is the Germany's local state governments and possibly the German states. There was a news item. I don't know that much about it, but they have a stimulus program similar to that in the United States, and they might have been phished for between 34 million and $100 million. There was a phishing scheme, and it was designed to attack the stimulus program. The stimulus program, obviously, we're talking about in the United States. I believe they're almost passing the latest one, so that's almost $2 trillion. That's a lot of money. So obviously, the people in Social Security or in the phishing, social engineering, are designing attacks for this. Now, you also find people in unexpected situations. You have people that have been sent home. They've been sent home with a machine that they may or may not be used to. They're in an environment. They might be sitting, in their home office or the dining room table or something like that, and no one is there. They can't, shout to the next desk over, or go down the hall and talk to somebody in cybersecurity or somebody else who might know what to do. So in the German case, for example, there's urgency, because like a lot of these banks and everybody, the politicians, are desperate to get this money out to the people who need it. And the people who are needed are desperate. They can't eat. So the people who are involved, they're going to make mistakes. So you have increased stress. The people are going to ignore the rules. I mean, especially these are business email compromises, the BECs. And these are very, very big. And the problem is, my favorite is the Bangladesh. It was Bangladesh. Excuse me, Pakistan. Bangladesh's central bank. They lost, I think it was 40 million. And the reason was that there was a SWIFT fax and nobody checked on it. No one made the phone call. So there wasn't a second check. And this is quite often what will happen is that the hackers will pick a time and, be Friday afternoon or something, and then target an individual. And a lot of these things, it's not that you've been hacked recently. It's the probability is you may have been hacked a long time ago, and someone's just sitting there, looking at your stuff until the time is right. It's not that they, come up with this. That this is very well organized, and they obviously wait for the right moment to actually, put the fish in. So, but in this case, because everybody's under a lot of pressure, everybody wants it. And social norms. You talk about, you've got the heroes out there. You've got these people who need money. They haven't worked for a while. They have kids. The kids are hungry. What are you going to do? You're going to want to give them their money, and quite often, unfortunately, people will be given money to the wrong people. So it's very, very important to do this. This is why this is a real problem now is because we don't really have enough, but people really often aren't ready for it. And one of the things that we teach at ITG is we have a course in business continuity. And and also we do a lot of stuff in instant response. And the bottom line for that, it's very simple. Have a plan. Get ready for this. And unfortunately, even though I wrote an editorial about this in 2009 about the probability of some sort of disease coming out of China. So this was it's not a black swan. It wasn't somebody unexpected. This is definitely something that's possible. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have plans for this. They're not ready for it. And as a result, you get the defenses are not there. Your cybersecurity staff, they might be sick, they might be out, they might be doing, they've got other things to do. So, and who are you going to call? How are you going to find other people? And so this is various types of problems. So, and then of course, a lot of people are under a lot of stress. Personally, my favorite epidemic was the SARS one in 2000. I think it was 2003 when I was in Hong Kong. But so a lot of people haven't seen one of these before. So they're stressed. They feel that this is going to be a real problem. They're isolated. You can't call people up. You may not be able to communicate with them, or they might be busy, or in our shop, it's different time zones quite often. So all of this has, some major issues that are something that you have to consider when you're in terms of your system of what's going to happen. So, of course, you always have to remember that the social engineering is exceptionally well organized. A lot of the times, the research, they have goals, they have business targets, they have incentives, the whole 9 yards. It's a regular business, and they have quite often all done the research and reconnaissance. I like to tell my delegates when I teach the course that I'm a time traveler, and I'm from the last century, and I've been sent to this century to teach you guys about privacy. The research and reconnaissance, it's sort of amazing to me to see what goes on online, and everybody wants to tell everybody about everything. And I've been apparently one of the norms in hacking is all information is valuable. So it doesn't matter how low level you are, is that if they can hack at very, very low levels, they're into your system, they're into your computers and into your database. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to steal anything right now. The whole point of what they're
looking for, and it should be part of your risk assessment, assuming you've done a risk assessment, is to figure out how to monetize stuff. So that's where they go. So this is the step. They do the goal requirements, figure out what they want, and what can they get from you that they can monetize. And quite frankly, sometimes what they get from you, it wouldn't be what you would expect. For example, let's take a law firm. A law firm are high targets, not because anybody wants what they not a lot of money. I mean, they might be able to get some money from an escrow account in a real estate deal, but they're usually not that. It's just that the information the law firm has is wildly valuable. So that's their goal, and they research this and find out who they can attack, when they can attack. They analyze it, they do the attack, and if you don't succeed the first time, you try again. So it's not that this is an ongoing process, and you have to figure out by looking at this where your soft points are. And the big point about cybersecurity, you have to understand that not all information is of equal value. Like B2B information may be a lot less than healthcare information. So you have to realize, what is valuable and what the potential attacks could be. That's very important. Now, I've told you some of this. I mentioned the WHO and the INT, and there's thousands of domains out there with cures, and they also what they're selling. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's being sold is based on is based the yeah of a let's see, the latest numbers I have are there's something like 22,000 are clearly malicious, but there's another factor of 20 that might be issues. That just could be a lot of spam. What are they selling? They're selling maps. They're selling um, fake cures, fake vaccines, fake testing, and now we're going to see massive attacks over the refunds. Some poor woman with a husband and kids just lost it's like $3,200 because they clicked on the wrong thing. So you have to, or they could be hawking various types of other stuff. Like, okay, we can sell you. I've seen this. The phishing emails offers to send you hand sanitizers or N95 masks or ventilators, whatever. So these are, and obviously a lot of people are a little desperate, and if you're not familiar, if you're not well educated, if you're not aware, and it's easy to do. I mean, to my shame, um, I got something from my voice over IP, and it had an attachment to it, and I hopefully I didn't get infected, but I didn't think because it looked totally like my voice over IP. So it's very, very, very easy to make mistakes in this. Now, um, another trick that a lot of these people do is they imitate authority figures. So the big one is quite often, I always like the stories about, and this is going on at a major level because people are panicked. So if you get an email from the CEO or the controller or somebody imitating a government organization, or let's say a valued client, whatever. This is something that they leverage to get you to make a mistake. You want to get the money out fast. You understand there's no one to talk to. So you're more likely to fall for these various types of things than something else. I mean, here's the big one: stimulus registration. I mean, I haven't examined that, but there is a process. I believe it's through the banks, as far as I know, um, that you have to register, and that's an easy one, especially if you've been watching somebody for a long time to figure out what their soft underbelly is. You can figure out what are the trigger points, who tells these guys what to do. Um, there could be some sort of registration. There could be a government directive for regulations. You are subject to this type of regulation, and please go to this website and click on this. It's that stuff, and it's signed IRS, signed, Health and Human Services, signed CDC. God knows, or it could be from a banking authority. Depends on who regulates you. And that's the easiest thing in the world to come up with that. And because you don't have a really good idea of what to do, or there's no one to ask, and it maybe a second check is not necessary, or maybe you decide to ignore it because you want to get the money out fast. I mean, it's very, very strong for anybody influential for an authority provision to tell you basically what to do. You could get something from headquarters saying, okay, this has to be done now. We've got to get this out. A lot of people aren't here anymore, so we have to make sure that we're moving right along. Okay, here are some of the topics that are hot. Well, the stimulus checks are going to be really great. My favorite one was if you don't pay up, of course, in Bitcoins, I'm going to come over and give you the virus.
So that's my favorite. I have not personally seen that. Apparently, it's been out there, but so that's the extortion one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how somebody in Russia or something like that is going to come over and infect me. But you know, who knows? I'm sure they've gone through a couple Tor things, so it looks like it's closer. Anyway, charities, big time. Donate to healthcare workers, vaccine research. That's going to be fun. That's successful. And they're, of course, nation state actors. I mean, the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Chinese are taking advantage of this. They're out there. You know, they want as much information as possible, or they want to, do disinformation campaigns. And according to the U.S. State Department, that's the quote. That's where I got that from. There are swarms of online false personas. So there's a whole lot of players in this, and some are basically the top drawer. We're talking about first team, because this is a gift from heaven. Okay, delivery platforms. This is obviously phishing emails. You're going to see vulnerabilities. Some you might have a watering hole attack or something like that. The vendors are third-party apps. There's a ton of malicious stuff out there. We're seeing what is Emotet going around, and trick bots. So we're seeing bot networks coming around. A lot of things that wouldn't have worked before could be really great now. Like, for example, because people are so desperate and there are certain functions that have to go on, DDoS attack could be much more effective now than you might in normal times, that you might have to use a ransomware attack, but distributed denial of the service, you just close down their access. Somebody might be willing to pay in that case in order just to get the hospital open. The big one, obviously, is insecure endpoints and end users. So you all quite often might be sending people out the door with a computer that's inaccurate, that's not configured properly. And they're not used to it. They're not used to some of the you're telling them to use an app like a video conferencing tool that they might not be familiar with. And the real problem is training, because before you actually use these things, it'd be a better idea to try to train them and understand what they're doing. Of course, the bad domains. Okay. These are certain types of things that you have to worry about in terms of the stuff you have. So they're various. The first one is, let's see, I've got it divided in, what was my logical methodology here? Okay, yeah. There are three things. First of all, you have to worry about make sure your equipment is nailed down. So you have to make sure that when you send somebody out the door with maybe they're just working on their own personal thing. Maybe your shop does, bring your own device. Or I'm totally against that, but it's bring your own disaster as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of times the question is who has physical access to these things. So normally that's not a big deal in an office situation, because you've got your physical security perimeter. Your physical perimeter security is probably pretty well nailed down. I mean, if you go into any building in New York, for example, there are people on the desk. You go into the elevator, you can't go anywhere unless you can show a barcode, or you have it. So that's fine. But if you're home, obviously none of that exists. So all sorts of other people can potentially have access to your stuff. Now, at my home, I don't, since I'm still stuck in the last century, I don't use Wi-Fi. I mean, my computers are plugged into my router with a wire. But not everybody sets up their Wi-Fi correctly. It's fine. They're not, they haven't taken the time to learn about these things. Or maybe they, go and get a public Wi-Fi. And then, okay, great. We have a VPN. We say use a VPN. Well, maybe they don't know how to use a VPN. Maybe that hasn't been, if that's not the default setting. So maybe your stuff hasn't been done properly. Unauthorized devices. Um, one of my main issues is the Internet of Things. God, I hate those. For example, your refrigerator. My favorite story about that is that this mom had a kid, and the kid was abusing their privileges and screen time. They were using too much screen time. So the mom said, "Okay, you can't use your computer." Well, the kid's wasn't being a 21st century kid, says, "Okay, fine." So he uses the game box. So he accesses the internet with a gaming console. All right, well, that's great. So what's this? So the mom takes away that. So what does the kid do? Oh, no problem. I'll go through the refrigerator. So he communicated on his, through the, I guess it was the most advanced LG refrigerator. Right, kid. So, but this is, storage devices, somebody coming in with a thumb drive, that's your standard Stuxnet. This is, this is a hacker's dream, because there's a whole bunch of attacks that can only occur if you have physical access to these things. And this is one of the things. All right, the other thing is the loss of these devices. One of my favorite cases in Office of Civil Rights, which is people who regulate and HIPAA, was I believe it was the Dallas Children's Hospital, and the hospitals are always losing computers with patient information on them that have not been locked down. They're not password protected. They don't use, the security on them. The SEC has stated to broker dealers, a lot of whom are using cloud, that they're not using the security controls that are offered by the cloud services. The cloud services have these fantastic security controls, and quite often they're just not being used. And quite often it's not easy to figure out how they're being used. So it's very important for people to understand these things. Okay, communications. VPN. You might, right now, yesterday, Google came out with a new product, Beyond, which is their zero trust, which you don't have to use VPN. But if you do use a VPN, make sure that whatever any stuff that you give people or any communication, that it's configured automatically. You have to make sure that that is a standard procedure. In the GDPR Article 25, I believe, states, it's a concept from Canada, it's security by design, security and privacy by design and default. And that's our object, is we don't want to have people thinking about this. We want to have them going out the door, and they don't have any choice. They have to have the VPN. If you have policies from home, be sure that they're there. Make sure that you have these policies available, and make sure people are trained on them. It's not too late. There are tons of stuff out there online. A lot of it's free. We sell stuff. We have some good, stuff in terms of our policies. ISO 27000 is all about policies. Basically ISO 27000 solves an important problem in game theory. It's called the principal and agent problem. And basically agents will do whatever they want to unless the principal tells them not. That's the problem. And the only way you stop that is having policies and enforce those policies. And that's a real problem. Another issue here, we're seeing a lot of hacks on remote desk protocol stuff. There's a hack in Bluekeep, but a lot of these people are doing it from distance, and sometimes they're going through funny ports, and that's supposed to help them, but it doesn't always work. Home routers are another major issue, and the point is there you have to make sure that those are nailed down. They have strong passwords, and somebody else isn't doing a drive-by and trying to get that information. Okay.
Okay, these are some of the, the standard application securities that you have to worry about. Yeah, I was listening to the big thing, of course, is to make sure that you've got security there. Make sure your passwords are correct. You've got to make sure you're patched. I mean, there's some wonderful hacks out there with fake updates. So hopefully your security that you have chosen, your applications have automatic updates. So people don't have to worry about that, because that's one of the fishes. Restrictions, approved apps only. There are One of the suggestions is to have, your own company app store. So, I mean, because there have been recently, both Apple and Google have had issues with applications on their websites that have, for some reason, been malicious. So, if you have, the problem is you don't want to have, a personal computer or something loaded with junk, because you don't know as soon as you let those people out the door, you don't know what's on that machine. So make sure that whatever applications, preferably a company machine that's been configured properly, and that if they need different applications, that's limited to what they can actually download or utilize. Okay, video conferencing. Uh, there's, let's see, I'll run down a quick of them. There's Zoom, WhatsApp, Signal, Wire, Teams, FaceTime, and all of these have different, Google Meet, of course, and all of these have different aspects to it. And there's some surprise. I mean, all of them have different. Some of them can have different numbers of people. Uh, what you use really depends on what you're going to use it for. So a lot of the stuff that you use depends on your risk and what type of information. You always, in cybersecurity, it's really, really important. You don't need to nail down everything. You need to nail down what's important. So I know you guys got limited time. So make sure you think. I mean, that's in ISO 27000. That's the really importance of clause 6, is you do a risk assessment. And that there's a lot of laws on that. New York Department of Financial Services had that. So it's really important to think about your risk. There are a lot of laws. The new laws is that all cybersecurity is based on risk. And that's more important now than ever before, because you have to be sure that, there's some information you don't want to have video conference, or there's certain types of information you don't want on a particular machine or a particular app. And before you go out and you say, okay, guys, you can use this. Think about it, like Teams. Teams is great, but the problem is it's not encrypted. They don't have I love it. It's E2EE, end-to-end encryption. So, and some of the other ones do. So it depends what you're doing. Or you have a lot of intellectual property you're transferring. Do you have, healthcare data? Do you have financial data? Do you have Department of Defense stuff? And that is coming on for a whole different set of regulations through the certified something model sort of criteria. Anyway, that one is just been approved. So that is a big deal in terms of determining what sort of information you're doing. Okay, backups. Obviously, this is going to be a real problem if you're, have people out the door, because you don't have some sort of mirror images, and you also have to remember that ransomware will encrypt backups as well. So unless there's some sort of gap between them. So make sure you have an approved storage destination, and you make sure that it is automatic. I mean, a lot of the apps, Microsoft, Office 365 has a lot of that. And so there are a lot of good. Okay, cyber awareness, big issue for everybody. Always good things, At our shop, we have to take, awareness training. I teach the GDPR. I have written extensively. I'm a lawyer about privacy, but I still have to take the GDPR training. Strong passwords. A good thing is I'm a big fan of password managers. Also, the old concept of the 8-character password that went out. That came in 85. That's because the machines couldn't do anything about 8-character password. But you want more information about that, it's NIST 63B, which is really good. Phishing awareness, that's very important for people. Make sure they do not click on anything. Because these people are very, very good in terms of they will send your people emails that look exactly like your company email, because every down to the last whatever. So make sure there's privacy training if you need that. Obviously, it's much bigger in the GDPR countries, and there's a whole lot of GDPR clone countries out there. Or in the United States, it's really sector. Instant reporting, get that down. Make sure if anybody sees something, say something. That's more important in cybersecurity than anything else. I always talk about gamification. This can be boring if people don't want to do it or whatever. So the best way to do it is, have to find out whether it's working, is to move it right along. Okay, implement the program. Like I talked about risk assessment. It's something very important for you to do. Make sure you identify the risk. Make sure you prioritize the risk. Not all risks come the same. Communication team, make sure that you engage your staff, and also make sure behavioral change, cultural change in any firm is one of the hardest things for anybody to do. It's, there are lots of studies on that, so it's a real nightmare in order to be able to pull it off. So it's something that's exceptionally hard to do, but it's absolutely necessary in this action. So here are some of your key actions. Make sure you have the training for social engineering, strong passwords, obviously. What's interesting, we keep talking about that, no one does it. Or, come up with a password manager, whatever. Patch, make sure that's hopefully automatic. Make sure you have VPN, or now you can go with zero trust. Make sure that you have a secure Wi-Fi at home, or preferably a wire. Make sure people talk about this. I mean, that's where you gamification. The team that has higher number of incident response gets a prize, and it could be at Akamai they have a very famous penguin. Okay, how do you tell if you're doing it right? Okay, measuring and monitoring is one of the most important things any of us can do. So make sure you have a percentage of employees that watch your material. So if you have a training video, let's see, one of ours, every time I take a training, one of our training videos, I have to take a test. And, and then if I don't pass the first time, and that has happened, I got to read the material again. I'm not good at the CC and the BCC part of Outlook. Anyway, also, are they asking questions? Have you integrated that? I mean, that's always a problem in these seminars, getting people asking. Incident reporting, and then of course pen testing. It's always good to try to fish your own people. Policies. All right, I know. We're Americans. We don't want to follow policy. The point of a policy is the ability to improve. If you don't write something down, you don't know what you're doing wrong. I mean, like, I had cancer, and my nurses stood there at the machines, and one read out what I was being poisoned with, and the other read it off the computer, and then they switched. And that's their policy. And the reason they have the policy is that they don't do that. Somebody, i.e. me, could have died. So it's really very, very important. I mean, I used to fly airplanes. Before you get in airplanes, you go over a checklist. And that checklist is there for a damn good reason. So you want to make sure that this is not just some sort of custom, or, that quote came from the Singapore Privacy Commission. It's not tradition or custom or something like that, or something people make up or do stuff on the fly. Make sure it's there, and if it's not working right, change it. That's very important. You always want to get continual. The whole point of this is to get continual improvement. So that's the whole point. Okay, these are the various solutions we have. We have various bundles and stuff. This is a word from our sponsor. And these are various stuffs that obviously are available on your website for remote working and all sorts of wonderful things. Okay, now we're theoretically ready for questions if you have any. If you don't, you can type them in the chat box. You can type them in the chat box or send them around. There is also a email here, Service Center. Everybody who registered for the webinar will be sent the slides, or they will be available definitely. I think that the presentation will be up on YouTube, so everybody will have a chance at these things. I will be happy to answer any questions that you have right now. Something's blinky, if I can figure out what it is. Oh, there's all sorts of chats. Okay. These two. All right. What else is blinking? Okay. I love this. So this should tell you something about modern. Okay, it's open question. Preston commits. Okay. Where are the questions? All right. Is that gonna work? No. Oh, also there'll be a handout. Oh, there's the question. How do you make it bigger? Okay, all my employees. Oh, okay, all my employees. Can we use our IT tools to help monitor performance while? Oh, that's a good question. Can you use your IT security tools to help monitor performance while people are at home? Oh, that's great. A legal question. It's also, you just asked a legal question that has something to do with employment law. I was a tax and security guy and banking, but employment law, I do know enough about it to know that employment law is exceptionally local. So the question about whether you're monitoring your employees' performance as they're working from home will depend on your local laws. So what I would do, hopefully, if you have an HR function or something else, or you can always ask an attorney, you can look it up yourself, is whatever the local law says in regard to monitoring people at home. I know that there has been a lot of stuff out there about monitoring. There have been a couple lawsuits on Facebook in terms of asking for people's passwords and various types of things. However, I would check your local law to find out whether or not that applies to you. Part of the problem in this business is to find out what is to figure that one out. In many other countries, like in the UK, they have a central law, but in the United States, we have 50 of them. For example, there are 50 incident response laws in the United States. So there are 25 cybersecurity laws requirements, and there's 9 that have rights of private action. So you have a whole bunch of areas in here that that could change in terms of what you're doing. Let's see, are there any more of these things? Oh my God, yes there are. Let's see if I can read them. Oh, you people have had fun. Hopefully you got that one. Okay, what is my responsibility as an employer if someone clicks on personal malware on my network or device? For example, they click on a stimulus check email without using my company's laptop while at home. Well, that's a good reason. Another good reason to have this stuff written down is that the general rule is that employers under the respondeat superior, as I remember from 40 years ago, that you are liable for actions of your employees. But if that's a good idea, that's why you should have a policy. If you have a policy in place that says thou shalt not do this, and if you make it clear to the employees that they shall not do that, then if they make a mistake, then it's their problem. So it's really very important to make it clear to everybody what is their problem. So even if they're using your machine, it doesn't necessarily make you liable if they lose a security check to malware, because they just happen to be using your machine. I mean, somebody could make the argument that you were liable in some way, shape, or form because it was your machine. But hopefully, okay. Can I simply make my employees sign a work from home? Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, of course you can make them sign that. Okay, all my employees, yeah, definitely. All my employees uh, work from home, but we're concerned with productivity. Yeah. All right. I think that's a question of state law. How about compliance with NIST and CIS? Well, there's a lot of misunderstanding about NIST. NIST doesn't require you to comply with anything. Even NIST 53 doesn't require you to comply with anything. NIST 53 is merely a catalog. What happens to find out what you have to comply with, you have to read the specific regulation itself. Now, a lot of the regulations for like FSMA, FedRAMP, all that stuff don't refer you to 53, they refer you to NIST 171. And you have to remember, these are guidelines. They do not have anything to do with, these are guidelines in terms of telling you what to do. Now, no one, with a few exceptions, they are going to start monitoring for Department of Defense, because the old DeFars regulation wasn't being complied with. So Department of Defense came up with this new program, the CMMC program, that will require auditors, and they will require you to audit. At that point, they might come in and tell you to comply with NIST. CIS is that they're just that Computer Institute for Security. That's just it's great. There's those controls are wonderful. It's just there's no law that I know. How do you secure home routers? Well, you have to start out with a good password. Depends on what your router has. I mean, it really depends on the router. I mean, a lot of them, hopefully the newer ones, there are some hacks I've seen where they actually, for some of the routers, they come in and look at the BIOS. I would ask people, one of the things I would ask people when they hook up to your system is to ask them which router they have. The best way to do it is hopefully passwords, and hopefully they have routers that are working properly. A lot of them will I used to have them when I was young and ignorant, like 2 years ago. I had my internet service provider router, and God knows that's the reason I went out and bought my own, is because I wanted to have better security. The only way to do that is to ask them what they have, and you might be able to change the password remotely, or tell them to plug it in. Let's see. What do you prioritize as a small startup scale up, or do not have an internal IT system? It depends on what you have. I mean, there's a lot of information. Remember, hackers are in it to make money. If your information isn't worth anything, no one's going to bother with you. So, I mean, what do you have? Do you have business-to-business information? Do you have? I mean, when I was young, we wanted our name in the phone book. So I'm sure my name and email address and telephone number are out there. They're just not worth anything, because the only thing you can do with my telephone number is annoy me. I mean, it doesn't give you access to any account unless I'm a really idiot. So what you have to do, and it's very, very, very important, regardless of what size you are, sit down and figure out what your risks are. What are your assets? And one of your assets, a most important asset, is information. Because remember, information is not ancillary to business anymore. business is information, and one of the most important things you want to protect is your digital supply chain. But you got to sit down and figure out what information is really important to you, and is it important? More importantly, is it important to anybody else? Can anybody else monetize that information? Healthcare information and financial information, of course. But if your information isn't that important, then basically who cares? Is VPN secure? I would check most VPNs. Obviously, they're into making money. So whoever you sign up for. I was watching something that they were suggesting you get a VPN from someplace else, so it looks like you've been routed everything else. Theoretically, VPNs are secure. I want to say that's the caveat, is because it really depends on how you use them. Do you have a good password? Have you patched it? Is it up to date? Do people know how to turn it on? That's the real problem, is quite often with all these great cybersecurity tools, is sometimes we don't really know how to turn these things on. Many of my employees would likely to want to continue to work for how do we prepare for that? Okay, my business is not set up for to be entirely, well, I mean, it's not that I mean, at my firm, we do work from home. I've been doing it, for 3 years, without any problems. It depends on what you do and how you do it. But what you have to do is, it's like anything else. When you're creating your IT infrastructure, you have to think about what the risks are and how you do it. It's not easy, but it's certainly possible. You have to figure out what type of, I mean, for example, with now the cloud infrastructure, especially with zero trust, I think it's quite possible for more and more people to work from home securely. I mean, I think there's a lot of things in the cloud. I mean, I would trust Microsoft and Google because they spend they spend billions of dollars on cybersecurity. But the problem is always with attacks in the cloud is the API. And if you're doing work in the cloud and you have Internet of Things, be sure to look at your control checklists. The Internet of Things is NIST IR 8223, I believe, and then look at the Cloud Security Alliance for checklists for various other types of things. And I'm running out of time. Okay, so if that one, yeah, exactly. You have to be very careful about monitoring employees if you're in Europe, because it's a privacy. It depends on where you are. Where you are, remember, laws internet goes beyond borders, but laws do not. So, what's the most imperative? ISO certifications, the company. Well, no, ISO certifications, the company doesn't have to have any ISO certifications. ISO 27001 is the best one for a simple reason, is people don't get ISO certifications because they want to. They get it because they're trying to sell stuff. And their clients and their customers say, okay, we want to make sure our supply chain is sure. And the best way to do that is if you have that piece of paper, then they don't have to come in and do a second party audit on you. They know that you're being audited every 30 seconds. I also believe that as a best practice, it protects you from lawsuits in the United States. I can't tell you that directly because there are no lawsuits. There's no cases on it yet. But I think that's eventually we're going to start seeing some rights of private actions. What information do we need to oversee cybersecurity risk? Oh Lord, I do this all the time, every day. So it's cybersecurity. It depends. You have to look at your information and decide how anybody can steal it, and then to figure out what the risks are to what the information you have. I mean, I have to deal with a whole lot of risk, but you have a far limited number. So the object of the game is to figure out what you've got and then protect that. Best to download an antivirus application to a tablet. I haven't seen it. That's a good question. Which free I don't I don't really know. It depends on what else your tablet is What else do you store on your tablet? Frankly, I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, like anything else, you research it. I mean, I would start with Gartner and see, what's out there and what do they suggest. HomeWide, it might not be, it might not, my HomeWide might not encrypt. It's possible to reach my corporate system via home network. Beat the security. I'm not sure if you really want to beat any VPN security. You're using it theoretically for a reason. That's a configuration issue. That's something I don't really know the answer to. I don't think it's a good idea to try to beat the security. I might warn everybody though, that does happen on a regular basis. Is one of the problems with employees is that, especially if they're working in a new situation, is everybody has a workaround. So they say, well, I don't want to do this. I don't want to follow all these policies and procedures. I'll come up with something different. That's why in the ISO world, we audit people. We want to make sure you're not screwing up. So we come in and find out and look at you and to find out if there's something weird. That's the important part. You know that it's good because somebody came in and took a look at it. It solves the principal and agent problem. But that's going to happen with your employees. So you're going to have to think about making sure that everything you do is appropriate, but making sure they're trained and they know the reason why these things are appropriate. The reason why there's a VPN, because there's a very strong reason, because the type of, it really again depends on the type of information you've got. I mean, what information do you carry around on your tablet? What information do you have in your home system? Is it really valuable that somebody wants to steal or not? Okay, I very much apologize. I am 5 minutes over. If there are any, I don't see any more questions. If there are any more questions, I may see them, but I forget about it. Anyway, if there are any more questions, please send them to the email address on the screen. Otherwise, I will let you go about your day and do something far more interesting than listen to me. So if you have any other issues, please contact that email on the screen. And I would like to thank you very much for your time. And that is the end of the webinar. All right. Thank you very much.